Actually, according to what is proper, I want to begin by thanking Charun Vaibhavi in my own humble way for all of the extraordinary service they've done. I should say practically legendary service. They're in Utah. And so none of this would be happening without your extraordinary service to Prabhupada.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mother. And reciprocating yours. Thank you for all your service.
Well, you know, I guess all three of us are survivors.
Not dead yet.
So, perhaps following, perhaps actually following Prabhupada's tradition, which of course we should do, I could say a few words about the initiation and then the vows and so on, and giving the name, collecting the fees. Just kidding. So, I once did a study in the Bhagavatam of the word Diksha, which is, of course, the Sanskrit word that we translate as initiation, to see how that word was used in Vedic culture throughout history. And it's very interesting. In the Bhagavatam, which, of course, describes the world before Kali Yuga, the Bhagavatam ends with Krishna leaving this world and the Kali Yuga entering. It's mentioned several times in the Bhagavatam that the Kali Yuga, this age, began the very moment that Lord Krishna left this earth. In a sense, he's always here, but he removed his manifest presence. So interestingly, the word Diksha, if you look at earlier Vedic culture, at a time when people performed fire sacrifices, for example, which you find everywhere in the Bhagavatam, and these fire sacrifices were found throughout the world. You find them in Greek and Roman culture, Egyptian culture. They worship the sun god. And so, in fact, from the Sanskrit word Agni, or fire, we have English words like ignite. So, in that previous Vedic age, the idea was that the offering into fire is a process which manifests the absolute truth. And you find this very clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 24, where Krishna says, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir, that when you make an arpanam, when you make an offering to the absolute, to Brahman, then that which you offer, and the word given is havis, which literally means ghee. And you find in that section of the Gita that Krishna, in chapter 4, Krishna talks about sacrifice. And of course, the Sankirtan yajna is a sacrifice. But Krishna talks about sacrifice, many kinds, but he uses the original language of sacrifice, namely fire, ghee, offering. He uses it literally and also symbolically. For example, in the Gita, Krishna says that you may offer the ghee or the offering of the sense objects into the fire of the senses, so that as you experience the world becomes an offering to Krishna. In other words, all your sense experiences become an offering to God. Or you can offer sense activities into the fire of the controlled mind. So Krishna used that language, indriyagna, into the sense fire, or and so on. So he's using this structure, this model of the classical fire sacrifice, where there's someone who offers, there's an object which they offer, and there's the recipient. They offer it into the fire, and that becomes a symbolic structure for all kinds of offerings to God. That's in the Gita. And Krishna says in that section that the arpanam, the offering, whatever it may be, the offering to the absolute becomes itself absolute. This is actually the Gita verse that describes what Prabhupada always said, that devotional service is non-different from Krishna. Because after all, devotional service means offering your life to Krishna, your activities and so on. And so Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir, when we make an offering to the absolute, the actual thing we offer, which can be ghee, it can be our body, our mind, our life, that also becomes absolute. And then, so Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno, and it's received, our offering is received by the absolute, the Brahmagni, the absolute fire. Brahmagno Brahmanahutam, and the person who offers takes on the same spiritual nature. So Brahmaiva Tena Gantavyam, and the only possible destination for someone offering to Krishna is Krishna himself. One will actually go to the absolute, and by what Krishna calls Brahma Karma Samadhina, by the samadhi, or this complete absorption in Brahma Karma, working for the absolute, serving God. So when we look at the Bhagavatam, we find that in previous ages, often people performed the actual physical fire sacrifice as a primary activity. But whenever they would do this, before they performed the sacrifice, they had to undergo diksha, or preparation. The idea being that because you are coming directly into the presence of God, you have to, take a bath. You have to put on clean clothes. You have to clean your mind. Even I think in the Catholic tradition, they have certain, like you fast or don't eat meat for certain days before Lent or whatever it is. I was obviously not Catholic, but. And so the idea, for example, if you're going to see the deities, and if you're, for example, if you've been working, you're sweaty, you have to take a bath. If you have to put on proper clean clothes, you have to be in the right consciousness. That's why, as soon as we enter the temple room, we bow down. Why? Because when we enter the temple room, we have to remember and express that we are humble servants of the servant of Krishna. And so, just as we prepare ourselves like that, so before the fire sacrifice, before coming into the direct presence of God through this process, Vedic process, people had to undergo a preparation, which was called diksha. Which means, for example, typically they might refrain from sexual intercourse, even between married people, because you don't want to go into the presence of God with your mind in that type of thing. And so they might refrain from sex. It might be a few days or a week or whatever it was. They would perform perhaps certain austerities, dietary austerities. Like, for example, the Bhagavatam talks about the Payovrata, the milk vow. With the milk vow, the Payovrata ceremony was a type of diksha, that before begetting children, the woman would undergo certain austerities to fix her mind completely in God, so that she would attract a great soul to her womb. And so in the Bhagavatam, in the earlier ages, diksha was an activity that prepared you, purified you for an encounter with God. And then what you find is that as Lord Chaitanya brought this supreme movement, the Krishna consciousness movement, this devotional revolution, which you can actually find in Indian history. It's just like before Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago, he sent a few generations of devotees to prepare the planet. And therefore you find great devotees like his own parents, like Pandu and Kunti, and even generations before them. And so just as Krishna prepared the earth for his arrival, for example, when a leader of an important country goes somewhere, there's a huge apparatus. I mean, there's airplanes full of people that go there preparing for that leader to come. So similarly, before Lord Chaitanya came, he prepared the earth. That included, one obvious example is Madhavendra Puri. who brought back to the world, in a sense, this ecstatic love for Radha and Krishna. But even before that, Madhavendra Puri's contribution, you have Ramanujacharya, and you have Madhvacharya, and so on. So all this preparation is going on. The world is being prepared for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. And then with Lord Chaitanya's appearance and the inauguration and the structuring and expanding of the great Sankirtan movement, Diksha took on a much more powerful definition. The idea was that what we're really offering to Krishna is not just fire, a ghee into fire, or milk into fire or something, but we're actually giving our life to Krishna. We're actually giving our life to Krishna. And the encounter that we're preparing for ultimately is going back to Godhead, going back to the spiritual world. And therefore, the Diksha, or the preparation, is a lifelong devotion to Krishna. It's following certain principles, chanting. Basically, the Prabhupada gave us a sadhana, method of practicing bhakti yoga. And so therefore, it's a lifelong dedication which prepares you for your ultimate encounter with Krishna in the spiritual world. And as Krishna says in the Gita, Yad gatvan anivartate, once going, they never come back. So that's what Diksha is. It's also, one other point I could mention perhaps, is that I find it fascinating that Prabhupada taught us many things. He taught us to distribute books, to preach, to have kirtan, to worship the deities, to read his books, of course. And all these activities are extremely important. And yet, in the initiation vow, he only asked us to do one thing. He asked us not to do 4 things. And he asked us to do, in Sanskrit, that's called vidhi nisheda. Nisheda means a prohibition, don't do this. And vidhi means a positive injunction, do that. So Prabhupada gave us 4 nishedas, or 4 prohibitions, as we know, but only 1 vidhi, only 1 positive injunction, which is to chant japa, 16 rounds of japa. And so I wondered why did Prabhupada select that activity among all the many important devotional activities as a vow? And by the way, I should mention that the word devotee, from the Latin devoto, voto means vow. Of course, voto is just Sanskrit, vrata. You just take off the R and it's Sanskrit. I mean, because people, put on the R. What you find in the history of linguistics, history of languages, people tend to simplify. When you get a bunch of consonants together, people want to make it simpler. Like, for example, in Bengali, bhakta, the K and the T, so they say bhakata. So you don't have consonants together. Or parikshit, where you have KSH, so they make it pariki. So, anyway, I'm sorry for that linguistic attack. But in the same way, so you have the word vrata, so it became simplified in Latin just to voto, or voto. That took off the R. So, therefore, the word devotee literally means to live by a vow. To live by a vow. That's what the word means etymologically. So in that sense, grammatically, when we make this vow and keep it, we are literally becoming devotees. We are living by a vow. So as far as Prabhupada selecting japa among the many important spiritual activities he asked us to perform, I believe that I'll tell you what I consider to be the importance of japa, perhaps why Prabhupada chose it. In our other activities, there are, you could say, human perks. Like, for example, prasadam. That's the most obvious example. When we, let's say, have one of these wonderful feasts, sure, we're being pious and spiritual, but we're also, frankly, sometimes stuffing our face with this very delicious food. So, so again, when we eat prasadam, of course, that's a devotional practice, but there's an obvious payback. There's an obvious perk to eat prasadam. Or even in Kirtan, even non-devotees, they like to get together with their friends and family, sing, dance, jump around. Everyone likes to do that. And so when we do Kirtan, of course, Kirtan is transcendental, and yet it satisfies a certain human need and gives a real human pleasure. And you see devotees sometimes, racing around and swinging and dancing, and it's like prasadam. It's a transcendental activity, but it also gives a material pleasure, in a sense. But when you think of japa, where's the material pleasure? It's really just a pure spiritual encounter with Krishna. And so in that sense, I consider my own life that japa is really the best barometer of my attachment to Krishna. Because, for example, now I'm talking to you, and for me it's a great pleasure to be able to see you and speak with you. And you could say I'm just sort of a born teacher or whatever. It's just perhaps my nature. And so I really enjoy seeing you. I love the devotees, so it's a pleasure to see you and to talk with you. But when I sit down to chant japa, there's no one there, no one's applauding, and it's not like tasty food. It's not even with my friends swinging around and jumping and dancing. It's just me and Krishna. Krishna and I. So, and yet it's actually, I can see why japa is so important, because it's my private quality time with Krishna. If you think about it, we're always with other people, we're working, we're doing this, running here and there. But there's that one activity where it's very private, it's very intimate, it's just you and God. And Krishna is the only person that actually knows everything about us. I mean, sometimes those powers are attributed to Santa Claus. He knows when you've been naughty, he knows when you've been nice. But actually it's Krishna. It's actually Krishna. And so sometimes, I know in my own life, sometimes people praise me when I know in my heart that I didn't do everything I should have done, or I did something I shouldn't have done. And sometimes people criticize me, and I know in my heart that actually I did the right thing. I acted sincerely. And of course, sometimes people criticize me, I deserve it. But still, Krishna is the one person that really, really knows us. Krishna is the one person with whom you can totally open your heart and just confess and say everything. Because is there anyone in the world? Of course, in America, people go on television and tell all the most horrible secrets of their life, which I can't quite figure out. I have all these television programs where people just get on and they just say horrible things about their life. But I know myself, I guess my sense of personal dignity. I certainly try to, I reveal my mind to devotees, and so on, and I'm blessed with many very wonderful spiritual friendships, and yet there's some things that they're private. I think there are some things that you don't tell everyone or anyone, because they're just things that are, but Krishna knows. So Krishna is the one person to whom you can tell everything, or he already knows everything. And so that's what japa is actually. Japa is, in a sense, it's a unique, very special activity. It's your quality, private, intimate time with God. And so somehow Prabhupada selected that activity, japa, as part of the initiation vow. I remember back in the early 80s, one of the big ISKCON gurus, one of the Fab 11, as I say, he added...
reasons right there.
Yeah.
I remember he added to the initiation vow that, chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 principles, and read Prabhupada's books an hour a day. And I think he was trying to be, pious or something, but I always thought, I don't think we should change Prabhupada's initiation vow. Obviously, we should read Prabhupada's books. We should associate with devotees. We should do Kirtan. Rupa Goswami, in chapter 6 of the Nectar of Devotion, and Prabhupada, they explain the basic principles of Bhakti Yoga and include all those things. And yet japa is very, very special. So that's, of course, the vow. Anyway, any questions on any of these points? It's nice. I'm meditating on that T-shirt that says Llama Fist. Any questions?
No, I just thought a lot about these things that you mentioned. There was a lecture I have where you mentioned that your japa is your private time with Krishna, and I've always tried to look at it like that ever since I heard you say that. I don't remember what lecture it was though.
Oh, I've said it more than a few times. What I tell myself is that I cannot have a better life than my japa. In other words, the quality of my life is not going to be better than the quality of my japa. And that no matter what problem I have, this is really that verse which Prabhupada read, and then he read the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that verse, that's what really galvanized his determination to get on the boat and come to America. And that was that verse, Vyavasaya, in chapter 2 of the Gita, Vyavasayatmika buddhire keha kurunandana. That that intelligence or reason, intelligence, which really...
Shout it out.
What's that?
Oh, our internet connection is slow and it just froze.
Oh. Yeah, breaking up is hard to do. So that in other words, when you really made up your mind, when we've really made up our mind that I will give myself to Krishna, then your intelligence becomes one. Because in this world, I mean, there are economic problems, there are psychological and emotional problems, there are social issues, there are professional things. I mean, there's a huge list of problems, and our mind can just bounce between all these different problems we have. And yet, as Prabhupada explained, as Krishna explains, there's really only one problem. You can consolidate like all your debts, every one of us really only has one problem in life. And that is, how can I surrender to Krishna? And of course, in this age, we surrender to Krishna through his holy name. And so therefore, if I can, sometimes, because we're all in this stuck down here in the Mahatattva. And so, inevitably there are times in our life where we're discouraged by this or that, or confused, or frustrated, or angered, or, discouraged, whatever. And yet, I always try to remember that no matter what troubles I think I have, if I can just take shelter of Krishna's name, all those problems will vanish. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that the bank won't keep sending me letters, but like somehow, Krishna will solve the problem and I'll be happy and I'll just see how to deal with it. So really, that's really and when Prabhupada read that, he understood I have to put aside all other considerations and think of only one thing. How can I carry out the order of my spiritual master? Which was, of course, to come and save us. So whatever our service is, whatever kind of body we have, it's interesting because if you look at the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, if you look at Vedic culture in general, there's this tension between two principles, which are the principle of diversity and the principle of oneness. Veda, for example, we are all one. We are all spirit souls. We are all part of Krishna. We're all equally part of Krishna. We are all eternal children of Krishna. And yet, we're in different situations. Materially, we have different kinds of bodies, male, female, old, young, middle. Someone's artistic, someone is entrepreneurial, someone is intellectual, someone is whatever. We all have different natures. We have different natures, we have different genders, we have different sizes and ages and ethnicities, and spiritually we may be on different levels. And so there's all this etiquette and social structure, varnashram, which Krishna himself creates, and so on, to deal with the diversity. On the other hand, we are all one. We are all eternal souls. And even as human beings, even as human beings. Someone may be a grihasta or a sannyasi or a brahmachari or a man or woman, but there are certain universal human challenges and problems and struggles that we all go through. I mean, how we go through it, obviously a man or a woman may approach it or experience it in a different way, an old person, a young person, people at different spiritual levels, but there are certain things that we all go through. And so there's a very powerful sense in which we're all one. We're all having this human experience and trying to get back to Krishna. And so all of us sometimes are discouraged. All of us sometimes struggle or have problems. And yet that faith that rather than get drawn into and in a sense defeated by all these problems, if I just chant Krishna's name, if I can chant one good round of japa, if I can chant one good Maha Mantra, if I can just give myself to Krishna's name, the illusion will vanish, and suddenly I'll be with Krishna again. Krishna will reveal to me that divine yellow brick road, and I'll know what to do, and everything will be okay. So really, to be initiated, someone has to be at that point where they really understand and really are ready to commit themselves to solving all their problems by taking shelter of the holy name. And again, it doesn't mean to be impractical or spaced out or bump into walls or go through red lights because you're chanting Hare Krishna. We have to be practical, but at the same time, always take shelter. Krishna says, Tameva sharanam gacha, speaking in the third person. Go to him alone for shelter. Literally, tameva. Go to him alone for shelter with all your existence, with all your being. Emotionally, intellectually, even physically. That's why we bow down. That's why I explained, by the way, bowing down to Western people. I say that obviously self-realization is about giving ourselves to God. And it's a way to engage your body. It's like holistic. So you take your whole body and you engage it in a spiritual process. And by the way, in the Old Testament, everyone bows down. So it's not just India. Anyway, so that's initiation. That's what the vow is. And of course, someone has to be convinced about Prabhupada's teachings. And we are being, finally, we're being initiated into Prabhupada's mission. Into Prabhupada's mission. Prabhupada, for two very powerful reasons, I will give my life, as long as it lasts in this body, to Prabhupada's mission. Number one, because I owe that to Prabhupada. Because it's Prabhupada that actually saved all of us, and everyone else, anyway. I don't want to be unkind, sort of the wannabe Prabhupads, but Prabhupada actually saved everyone, and whoever else is saving anyone in the Western world, or most of the world, is really doing so because of Prabhupada. And frankly, Prabhupada even totally re-energized the Gaudiya Math. So, Prabhupada, we owe that to Prabhupada. We owe that and much more to Prabhupada. And second of all, if you know anything about history, you know that there is a need for an international society for Krishna consciousness. The world needs it. To give an example, approximately 500 years ago, actually, during the time of Lord Chaitanya, the main religion in the world had a civil war and split up until now into two camps. And that was, of course, the Protestant Reformation. And it started out, actually, it really was a war, and people were killing each other. So it really was a sort of a theological civil war, with all kinds of political and economic factors thrown in, as you can expect. But anyway, today, everyone in the world knows who the Pope is. The Pope, Pope Francis, who, by the way, some of his best friends were devotees. So he's been eating prasadam for decades. And
that's awesome. I knew I liked this Pope.
And he's actually the first Pope in history that said that Krishna is the name of God, because one of his best friends is a Prabhupada disciple in Argentina. So he's seen Harinam and had lots of prasadam. He's actually heard our philosophy. But anyway, everyone in the world knows who the Pope is. No one in the world knows who the leaders are of the various Protestant organizations. I mean, the people in them probably know, like Lutherans probably know, at least some of them know who the like main Lutheran leader is, or the Methodists, or the Episcopalians, or Presbyterians, or the Church of God, or the Southern Baptist Convention, or whatever. But for example, I don't know who the Mormon or the Latter-day Saints, they allow us to call them Mormons now, but I actually don't know, who the leader is. I don't know who the leader is of any of the Protestant traditions, but I know who the Pope is. And so the world really needs an international society for Krishna consciousness. If you know history, then you'll know that very well. So the initiation is initiation ultimately towards serving Prabhupada. I should say one last word, and then we'll do the actual initiation. And that is my understanding of my job, of what I understand to be my job description, is to effectively connect my disciples with Prabhupada. Prabhupada makes this very powerful statement in the 6th chapter of Nectar Devotion, where he says the duty of a Vaishnava is to follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. So an image I often use is that Krishna sent Prabhupada down to earth with this this Vaikuntha bulldozer. And he created this super highway through the jungle of Kali Yuga, going back to Godhead. And so all of us are Prabhupada's followers. Prabhupada is the founder Acharya, and all of us are following Prabhupada. Among the followers of Prabhupada, those who are more experienced or whatever, they obviously help the others. When you're on a path, those who are a little stronger on the path help the others, but it's Prabhupada's path. And so therefore, I understand, if I do my job right, I save my disciples by connecting them strongly to Prabhupada, who saves all of us. So I don't claim to have any independent power to save people. I'm not a magician. But somehow or other, Prabhupada was very pleased with my service to him. At least he told me that. And so I feel confident in that one thing. I feel confident that I can help people to serve Prabhupada. And if they serve Prabhupada nicely, Krishna will save them. So that's what I understand I'm doing. Anyway, without further ado, any questions? If not, I'll proceed to the actual transaction.
And it freezes again.
Freezes?
You might be able to hear that it's frozen. Just wait a sec.
Are we back yet?
Yeah, now we are.
Kind of. We can hear you.
Okay. So, at this point, you should offer obeisances as we do, and then I will ask you a few questions. So, so what is the vow that you're making? The first 4 principles?
The four regulative principles are no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling.
Right. And positively, what will you do?
Chant 16 rounds a day and try to serve Prabhupada's mission.
Yes, 16 rounds a day of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra.
Yes.
For all your life. Very good. Thank you. So, Charu, you can chant on the beads?
I did that already.
Okay, thank you. So, your name is Janatari Devi Dasi, which I will actually, what I'll do is I'll send it to you by chat, and then and the capital A and capital I mean that those are long vowels, if you know what that means. And I'll explain what it means. Jana in Sanskrit means if you know Spanish or Portuguese, gente, people. Like Gentile, the word Gentile in Latin actually just means people. And so that word Gentile, or in Spanish or Portuguese or Italian, gente is just Sanskrit jana, or juntu or junta. It's the same word. And so it means people. And tari means savior. In Prabhupada's Pranam mantra, we have that same word, but in the dative form means unto the tari. So unto the tari means is tarine, paschatya desha tarine. This comes from a Sanskrit root which means to cross. And so when we bow to Prabhupada as paschatya desha tarine, tari or means literally one who takes you across from the material world to the spiritual world. And so for words like, for example, atara can also mean a raft that takes you across. And in the word avatara, it's the same word. Ava means downward. And so literally crossing down. One who crosses down, avatara, from the spiritual world to the material world is literally an avatara, one who crosses down. And interestingly, wherever the avatara comes, like Krishna or Lord Chaitanya or Prabhupada, as the Shakti-Avesh avatar, that place becomes a tirtha, which is made from the same root. So the word tirtha actually means a crossing. And it can mean a water crossing, like, for example, the place where the castrated bulls used to cross the river is called Oxford. Oxford. So the English word ford, where you ford the river. And so it's even said there's like the river, the Viraja River, Vaitarni River, that separates, the material and spiritual world. So Tirtha literally means the place where you cross. So the avatara crosses down to this world, and by crossing down actually opens up that crossing, that channel. When the avatar crosses down, the channel remains open, and then and you enter that channel at the Tirtha, and then you cross back to the spiritual world. So that's actually the word tari. It's a very interesting word, and that's the word that Prabhupada chose. So we, Savior of the Western countries, literally the one who takes them across. So Tari, Janatari is Krishna or Prabhupada or Lord Chaitanya, who literally takes the people across, saves them, takes them across to the spiritual platform. So that's Janatari, and then of course Janatari Devi Dosi.
Hare Krishna.
So if there's no other question, again, I want to thank Charu and Vaibhavi for making all this possible, for their decades of very, very dedicated service, and because of you, all this is happening. So thank you very much, and my thanks to all of you.
Nice.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj.
Jai, all glories to Prabhupada. And thank you all for listening. And as we say in Sanskrit, Tat Sarvang Janaha, which means that's all, folks.